In this video, we'll be going over stem changing verbs. Now, first let's talk about what exactly a stem is. A stem is the part of the verb without the ending. So for example, if we take the word hablar, the stem would just be habla. You can see that there's no ending here because the ending is typically the thing we change, and so the stem is the thing that's basically the root that is supposed to stay consistent in the verb. However, as you can see, today we're going over something known as stem changing verbs. And so what this means is that now we have these verbs which they change in the stem. And so one thing to note is that with stem changing verbs, there's no real way to tell which ones are going to change in the stem and which ones don't. The only thing I will say is that they tend to be verbs that kind of look like each other. The further you progress into Spanish, you almost start to get a spidey sense for which ones are going to stem change and which ones won't. But overall, you kind of just have to memorize which ones will and which ones won't. Now, one thing to note as well is that these stem changes, there are irregularities. And so, as I said, there's no way to really tell, and they shouldn't really be happening. In fact, even if we look at other languages like Portuguese, which is very similar to Spanish, the Latin-based language as well, there is no stem changers. And so in Spanish, it's just something that's unique in Spanish. And so overall, when we have stem changers, there's four kinds. There's E to IE, O to UE, E to I, and U to UE. Now real quick, with these bottom two, I have to explain some stuff. E to I is only in some IR verbs, and the U to UE is only in one word. It is jugar. Only in jugar. And the reason why is because it used to be hogar in Old Spanish, and because of that, it used to be an O to UE stem changer, but over time it essentially basically just got changed to be jugar. That's what happens with language, and this is kind of what happened with the stem changers, in which some people just start saying stuff a little bit differently, and then all of a sudden it kind of creates a snowball effect. Everyone starts saying that way. It diverts from the regular path into an irregularity. And so let's take a look at a stem changing verb real quick. So for example, we'll take the word pensar. Pensar means to think, to think. And let's look at how to do a stem changing verb. So first, what we're going to do, and take the word pensar. Now, what you can do is you can either change the end first or change the stem first. Let's change the end first and then change the stem. So first, we're going to take this off. Now, in this case, let's say I think. So in order to say I, if you remember for ARs, it's going to be O in the present. So O, pensó. But then what we have to do is now we have to take this E and we have to change it to an IE. So pensar is an E to IE stem changer. And so instead of saying penso, like we should be saying, it's actually pienso. And so anytime that you say I think in Spanish, always has to be pienso, not penso. As I said, it's just an irregularity in Spanish, and unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Now, let's take a look at a couple of rules with stem changers. The first is going to be that there is no stem change in the nosotros form. And this also applies to vosotros if you're learning Spain Spanish. Now, usually what I teach is not Spain Spanish, it's Latin American Spanish, but if you're learning Spain Spanish, no stem change in the vosotros form, neither the vos form if you're learning Argentinian Spanish or Paraguayan Spanish or Uruguayan Spanish. But overall, it's important to note this. It's never going to stem change in the nosotros form. So, for example, if we looked at all the conjugations of pensar, it'd be pienso. Next, we're going to have piensas for the two form you think, piensa, he, she, it thinks, you formal think. And then finally, when we get to the nosotros form, it's not going to be piensamos, it's just going to be pensamos, pensamos. And then with the eos ustedes form, finally going to be piensan. And so you can see that the nosotros form is not going to have a stem change, but every other form will have one. Now, the second thing to note is that the stem change will occurs in the vowel, stem changeable vowel, before the ending. And so what do I mean by this? Well, let's say if we took a word like preferir. preferir. It's an E to IE stem changer. Now, one thing, as I said, is that E to I is just an IR verb thing, just in some IR verbs, but certain IR verbs as well can be E to IE. There's a few like divertir, preferir, stuff like that. And so when we're looking at preferir, you can see that we have two E's, two possible stem changes here. But as I said, it occurs in the vowel before the ending, or I should say closest to the ending. So in this case of these two E's, these are both stem changeable, right? Could either one could be an E to IE. However, what it's going to go to is prefiero. So you can see that this E is going to an IE. Yo prefiero, I prefer. And then it's going to work the exact same as pensar, except for the IR verb endings now, because we're talking about an IR verb. So it's prefiero, prefieres, prefiere, preferimos. You can see it's not prefierimos, it's just preferimos, because it's nosotros, so it's going to be no stem change. And then finally, prefieren. So it's going to work the exact same. Pretty much every stem change works like this, at least with the present tense stem changers. Now I do have to note that this is just for the present tense. There are some other types of stem changers, like in the preterite tense and in the progressive tenses. But in this case, just talking about present, it's a good way to get a base for how stem changers work. And then let's take a look at some other types real quick. So like an O to UE, it's very common, maybe the most common one I see. So dormir, for example, the common one. To sleep, right? I think you sleep in dormitories, sleep in dorms, so dormir, to sleep. So if I were to say I sleep, dormir, dormo, and then going from an O to UE, duermo. It's going to work the same as this with all the same endings. Then if we look at an example of an E to I, so like the word pedir, to ask for, to order, to request. It's an E to I. Now what we're going to do, first go from pedo, and then E to I, so pido. And for all of these different types, it's going to be the exact same rules. Finally, getting down to a verb like jugar, shown the yo forms, jugar, to play. As I said, it used to be jugar in the past. And so that's why it used to be an O to UE, but now it's a U to UE. So in this case, juego. I play, juego. So yeah, that's stem changing verbs in the present. Not much more to it. As I said, they're just kind of irregularities that happen. And in fact, you'll even see some of these in stuff like nouns. So like, for example, if I were to say port, puerto, it actually used to be porto. And you can see this in languages like Portuguese still Porto. But now in Spanish, it's puerto. And it's always going to be puerto because it's a noun. But a lot of times with these, you can actually kind of work backwards and then figure out what they're going to be. So this UE in Old Spanish used to be Porto, but now the way that we say a port in Spanish is going to be Puerto, el puerto. So overall, stem changers, they tend to be very common, but as far as stem changing verbs, these action words that change, these are the rules right here. So these are all the types, and then finally the two main rules. Hope that helped, and I'll see you guys in the next one.